All right. Welcome to the Marine Amateur Radio Club. We're going to talk today about AREDN networking in Utah. All right. Let's jump right in. First thing we want to talk about is why doesn't my mouse clicky make the slide advance? There we go. Okay. What is AREDN again? So I always start these deep dives with a brief introduction to AREDN. AREDN is the software or firmware build of the AREDN code base, which is based on OpenWRT. It runs on Wi-Fi equipment on the little routers. So if you have like an access point in your home, that's the kind of equipment we're talking about. This stuff runs on commodity equipment that has typically traditionally been used by wireless internet service providers or WISPs. WISPs. That's hard to say. And it provides some form of mesh networking. Mesh networking is different from your typical network because any member of the network can talk to any other member of the network. And mesh networks are self-healing. So if a new node appears, it will happily join an existing mesh and become a full-fledged member and be able to route packets and everything. And if a node happens to disappear, the other nodes will detect that and route around it. So they will find other ways to get where they want to go if a node that they were using for transit is gone away. So these things are running on amateur radio frequencies and with amateur radio privileges and amateur radio requirements. For example, they have to ID every 10 minutes and they have to do all the other things that we have to require. Can't use encryption. There's lots of different rules that we are subject to as amateur radio operators that normal people, unlike us, we are definitely not normal. Other people would be using this type of equipment under the Part 15 rules, which basically say everything's great, do whatever you want, as long as you don't exceed what, a quarter of a watt or something like that. Well, we can pretty much pump out however much power we want as long as we are aware of what we're doing. So if you want to build a really fancy schmancy Wi-Fi antenna that gives you 100 dBs of gain, as long as you keep your emitted power below 1500 watts, you're fine to do that as an amateur radio operator. Don't do that unless you're in a
watts with 100 dB gain. That's a good system, good setup.
yeah. I have no idea what the numbers actually add up to. More information is available on the website, aredenmesh.org. Don't go to aaron.org, areden.org. Yes, Jeff.
Now, aren't aren't most of the frequencies shared with?
Yes, the frequencies are shared, but because we are amateur radio operators, we can use whatever power we can legally use. The rules on Part 15 basically say you can't generate any undue interference and you must accept any interference that you get. And so they are at our mercy. Though that equipment also will dynamically select channels and things, so it will try to avoid us if we're using a channel at higher power than they are expecting.
Don't we have like a tiny bit at the end that's not unlicensed?
There is a small section at the end of the 5.8 gigahertz band that is used by another service, and I believe we are secondary users on that section. And there is a small section at the beginning of the 2.4 gigahertz band that we are allowed to use as a primary, and the Part 15 stuff cannot use. So you will observe sometimes if you're looking at AREDN gear on 2.4 megahertz or 2.4 gigahertz, that it is on channel -2. And that's because the channels start at 0 and we back down 2 below that to get our signal outside of that Part 15 range. So it's kind of interesting to look at that and see what you can do with that. Most of the people around here are doing 5.8 gigahertz, but there has been a lot of 2.4 gigahertz in the past. So we'll talk about that as we move on. All right, so what is an AREDN deployment? It's one or more AREDN nodes permanently or semi-permanently installed and maintained and used. It does not have to be running the latest AREDN build. It does not have to be connected to the super node network. And if you don't know what that is, I'll talk about that in a minute. But the idea is that you've got a network that you have nodes on. Nodes are the individual radios that are doing the AREDN work, and you've got people using it and doing something with it. So that's what I'm going to be talking about when I talk about deployments moving into this. Let's talk about AREDN builds for a minute. So AREDN's been around for a while, and I said don't look at AREDN.org. There was the original thing that was developed for this was called Broadband Hamnet, BBHN, and it ran on old Linksys 2.4 gigahertz home access points. And it was very limited because those machines were extremely limited on what they could do. And later, when the phrase AREDN was coined, there was another one also, high-speed multimedia or something like that, I think. You might still see that sometimes. The AREDN stuff was like the third generation of using this technology for amateur radio purposes. And the original AREDN group, somebody who owned the website got annoyed and decided to take his toys and go home. And so the other people that were involved wanted to keep this thing going. And so they created AREDNmesh.org as a website to continue developing the project. So if you Google for AREDN and you find AREDN.org, the first thing you see is this big thing saying, this is dead, don't use it, it's gone, don't worry about it. We don't ever do this stuff again. That's not the case. Does Google show the right one now? It didn't used to. I remember when Paul first was looking at AREDN, I had mentioned it in passing, and he was like, AREDN, and he looked it up, and it was like, don't ever use this, it's dead, go away, basically. And he's like, are we really using this? What's the deal? And so I had to give him the background of it and why that happened and what is actually happening with that. So AREDNmesh.org is the site you want to go to. AREDN version numbers incorporate a protocol version, which is now version 3. That's the one that we're currently working. They have the year of release, the month of release, and an increasing sub-release within the month in case there is another build released in the month. That only happens if there's a big problem with a release build. You might get a .1 released. So, for example, 3.25.2.0 is 2025. February is the second month, so that's the 2, and 0 is the first build or release build in February. If they had discovered something weirdly terrible, horrific in that build, they would have created a .1 release build, but they didn't. And the 3 is the protocol version, version 3 of the protocol. There are 2 main versions of AREDN that are using version 3 protocol, and that's the old UI version and the new UI version. How many people in here are familiar with the old UI? Couple people. So the old UI looked like it was written in the 90s, acted like it was written in the 90s, and felt like it was written in the 90s, and was about as good as web software was in the 90s. So there was a push last year to re-architect and rebuild the entire system using modern web design and the React toolkit. And they basically rewrote the whole web UI. And that was released at the end of 2024 with the October build. The October build actually contained both versions, and there was a little button on the screen that you could click to go back to the old UI or go to the new UI. So if you could do everything with either UI, but you could pick which one you wanted to use. Future versions from 3.24.10 up to now only contained the new UI. And the reason for going to the new UI were multifold. They wanted it to be more modern. They wanted it to look and feel more like a real system that was modern. and they wanted to add new features and capabilities to it that they didn't feel were easily supportable with the old design, the old UI. The old UI was CGI script based, if you know what that means, and it was very static. The new UI is pretty dynamic. If things change, it'll actually change on the screen while you're watching it without you having to go reload the page. Starting next year, the routing protocol that's used, the base routing protocol will be changing to the Babel protocol. And I'm going to talk about that for a little bit, okay? So up until this point, the AREDN system has used a routing protocol called OLSR, Optimized Link State Routing Protocol. And what that means is that every node has to know every other node on the network and how to get there, okay? So as your network gets bigger, that gets more and more clunky and uses more and more memory within each node. Also, each node had to know all of the services that were run by every other node because there was no provision for going out and querying. Basically, whenever a new node connected to the network, it would say, these are my services, and the other nodes would pick that up, and then that was all they knew at that point. If you added a service later, it may not show up on everybody's node. So that's something to consider. The way the Babel protocol works is it's a much more dynamic protocol. And it's, if you guys are familiar with the flood fill algorithm, the flood fill basically says, start pushing data out. And if you see it go somewhere that it's already been, don't send it there, right? And so this new Babel protocol will actually be much more efficient memory-wise on each node as far as getting the data out to other nodes. There's also a separate protocol that is used for advertising services. And that protocol is more dynamic as well, in that all of the nodes are listening for updates to that particular protocol. And if you turn on a new service on your node, for example, all of the nodes will see that and reflect it, rather than just depending on when you joined the network. Now,
But the Babel protocol only worked on towers.
that tower was knocked down and nobody put it back up again. Okay. So the current release build, which is 3.25.10.0, the October build, has both OLSR and Babel protocols built into it. Now, if it's talking to another node that speaks the Babel protocol, it will use the Babel protocol. If it's talking to a node that speaks only OLSR, it will use OLSR. The problem is, if a node only knows the Babel protocol, information about those OLSR nodes won't travel that link. So you may end up with islands of OLSR nodes. Now, the process has been ongoing in running these side-by-side protocols over time, and we're down to like, I don't know, like 300 nodes on the supernode network that are still using OLSR only and not, that don't have Babel available. So the intention is to get rid of those over the course of the next few months. The first build next year, I'm not sure when exactly that will be, January or February. It will be Babel only, and it will be version 4. So it'll be 4.26. whatever month .0 will be the next release build. There are also nightly builds that you can run, and nightly builds, like they say, they're not built every night, but they're built anytime a commit is made to the source code, to the source tree. So there are currently 2 branches on the source code. One is the main branch, and that has both the OLSR and Babel code in it. And one is the Babel only branch. And so what's been happening up to this point is whenever some bug is fixed or some new feature is added, it has to get added on both branches, which has been fine. We've been able to do that without any trouble. But when we retire the OLSR protocol and switch to Babel only, Babel will become the main branch. So we'll move that code onto the main branch and OLSR will be no more. Okay, so let's talk about the supernode network. So one of the things that was added was the concept of a supernode. And if you want to think about that as you have a network of nodes in a particular region, you may have one or two nodes that are part of that network that are also part of another network that lives higher up, essentially, or what we call a supernode. The idea being that I don't necessarily, if I'm here in Utah, I don't necessarily care about Orb's camera on his front porch in California. I only care about things that are running in my neck of the woods, right? Now, if I'm doing a demo, I still want to be able to reach Orb's node and pull up his camera and show that, and I can still do that, but I don't necessarily need to see every piece of equipment on the mesh over the entire world. And so the SuperNet basically gives you the option of connecting into this worldwide group of networks. So think about them all as being independent little networks that all communicate through this SuperNet network. And I think there is even a facility to go a layer higher if it's determined to be needed. The way the SuperNet protocols work, they shouldn't care about that. It should be able to do multiple tiers. I don't think we have any of that deployed right now, but it is a potential thing that we could do. But yes, sir.
All of this dependent upon Wi-Fi?
Right now, there's a lot of Wi-Fi and there's also a lot of tunnels over the internet. And we're going to talk more about that as we go on. Okay. Unfortunately, there's not enough adoption to be strictly Wi-Fi everywhere. And obviously, you're not going to run a Wi-Fi link between New York and Australia, right? That's just not going to happen. So we do that, we support that using tunnels. And we'll talk more about tunnels as we move on. But if you think about this network, and when we are finished with the presentation, I'll pull up the live network and we can look at what it actually looks like right now. But yeah, this is just a snapshot that I took earlier today. And if you want to see this, you can go to worldmap.aredenmesh.org and access the full map. All right, so let's talk about AREDN deployments in Utah. Right now, there are several active AREDN deployments in Utah that I am aware of. We have a deployment here in Salt Lake County. Utah County has a deployed set of nodes. Davis County has some nodes deployed. Washington County and the surrounding areas down around St. George has a network going. And Cache County, at least they had a network. I don't know if they still do. But we're going to dive into each one of these and talk about them. So first, this is, if we look at the SuperNet, the SuperNode network, this is what it knows about nodes here in Utah. And it's only one node up in Ogden, a smattering of nodes here in Salt Lake, and a few nodes down here in Utah Valley. These are like Eagle Mountain is probably one of these. This is in Lehigh, I believe. And then this one way down here, I think, is in Salem. Now you'll notice that Cache County's not on here. Davis County's not on here. Washington County's not on here. We'll talk about why in a minute. But this is what's currently, if you were to join the network here in Salt Lake, this is what you would be able to access locally. And most of these are tunnel links. Most of these are not RF links. So let's talk a little bit more about tunnels. So what a tunnel does is it basically creates a pipe through the internet that goes from one node to another node and allows you to run either the OLSR or the Babel routing protocol over that link. So as far as the nodes are concerned, it's as if they had an RF connection to that other node, but it may be through the internet on the other side of the planet. And this works great as long as the internet works. But when the internet doesn't work, your tunnels go away as well. So, yes, sir.
There are
utilizing Starlink also.
We'll talk about that. So that's something to consider. Now, this map shows nodes that are connected to the supernode network. It only shows nodes that are new UI based. It doesn't show all of the RF links, and it doesn't show any DTD links. Now, DTD links are device to device links. So if you have two nodes and they're connected by a wire, by an Ethernet wire, those are what they call a device to device connection. And it looks and acts like a normal routed network connection to the routing protocols, but it's not using any RF. It's not using a tunnel. It's a direct wire connection. Those links are not shown on this map. So if you zoom in on somewhere and you see like if you zoomed in on my house, you'd see three nodes and two of them are connected via a wire. So there's no link shown between them, but you can connect to either one of them. And the other one is on an RF link. So you can actually see that RF link on the map. All right, and here's a URL that actually takes you immediately to the zoomed in on the Salt Lake Valley link. So you can specify a zoom factor and a latitude and longitude, and it will take you to that location on the map. Otherwise, it'll just take you to the global map, and you can zoom in from there. All right. So this is the old node map. So there used to be a node map that was created more manually. Basically, when you deployed a node, you could give it a latitude and longitude and tell it to publish that to the node map. Now the node map is generated automatically by crawling the network, but back in that time frame, these were ones that people had deployed and published their location. So you can see the Salt Lake Valley had a lot of 2 gigahertz nodes up and only a few fives, and you can see even a couple of threes out here. The yellow ones are threes. Some of these don't exist anymore, but this map doesn't expire registrations, so they will stay there forever. Some nodes have just gone away. Some nodes have failed. Some nodes, the amateur radio operator involved with it lost interest and turned them off. One guy moved to another state and gave his equipment to us, and it's sitting in the radio room over at Station 83 right now. So obviously, where it showed up on this map isn't real anymore. But you can get an idea of what was going on a couple of years ago, about 3 years ago, when the first wave of people interested in AREDN started doing some stuff with it. There was a lot of 2.4 gigahertz networking going on. There wasn't too much of the 5 gigahertz. The red ones are the 5 gigahertz. And back in those days, we actually had an allocation on the 3 gigahertz band. And so we had a couple of nodes deployed on that. We are now, the FCC took away part of that band from us, and I believe we're a secondary on the other part that is still there, but nobody's doing new deployments on 3 gigahertz. So that's unfortunate. This is the link to this particular map. And if you are interested in the historical nature of what the network looked like, you can go look at it. You'll notice there was some stuff up here in Cache County. There was Ogden, Brigham City. There was Ogden. There was a bunch of stuff in Salt Lake, down in Provo in that area. Even way out here in, looks like Vernal had a node deployed. There wasn't anything on this map that I ever saw from St. George or anywhere else in the state. So that's something to keep in mind. All right, so let's talk about Salt Lake County. Right now, Salt Lake County is primarily being spearheaded by Salt Lake County ARES. There are a lot of nodes deployed around the valley. Most of them are connected via a tunnel. And there's a couple of different tunneling protocols that were used in AREDN. In the old UI, there was what they call the legacy tunnel protocol. And then they added a WireGuard-based tunnel protocol. WireGuard is a lot more efficient. It is a lot faster. It's a lot easier to set up and configure than the old legacy mechanism. And the legacy one is going away. In fact, I think it's completely gone out of the UI at this point. So legacy tunnels, if they exist, will still work. If they were in your configuration, they'll still work. Next year, they won't. It'll be gone completely. The old protocol will be gone completely, and you'll have to upgrade to WireGuard. You really should do that anyway because the WireGuard ones are much better. There are a couple of RF links in the valley. I have a node that's pointed towards Chris, not the Chris that lives down in Harriman, but the Chris that lives in Murray, towards his node. And so you will see a link there. Although the last time I looked, it wasn't there. So his node must be offline or something is messed up with it. So, but that's, as far as I'm aware, the only active RF link that's up full time. We're working to change that. We're trying to deploy some backbone nodes at selected locations that have good visibility over the valley. The hardware for this consists typically of either dishes or what they call sector antennas or omnidirectional antennas as well. But most people are using either a dish type device like a MikroTik LHG or a Ubiquiti power beam or light beam, or they're using a sector device that will do a 120-degree span of, it'll cover a 120-degree arc of what it can see. So there are plans to put a sector antenna at Utah Poison Control, which is up by the U of U. There's been discussion about putting sector nodes on IMC. We've talked about trying to get Murray City to let us put nodes on our tower, which is located fairly close to IMC and has pretty good visibility over most of the city, most of the county even. And then there's been some efforts to get nodes deployed at mountaintop sites. I don't know how that's going. I haven't been involved with that, but people are talking to repeater owners and saying, hey, you've already got a repeater there. Can we put an AREDN node there? It won't interfere with you because we're on a completely different band. And if we can do that, we could potentially get some really good coverage of the entire valley. Yes, yes.
Where's IMC? It's like wonder somewhere.
Yeah, it's the big building, right? Yeah.
Okay. That one, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
So potentially we could get nodes on the roof of that building if everything works out.
Antenna that I'm going to put up at my house. And I looked at the map today and from coordinates to Poison Control and IMC, I can cover both of those with the sector antenna. And if I aim it halfway between the two, logic says I'll still cover both of them.
Right.
I'll be aimed right at Russ Harmon's house.
Oh. Okay. Well, we'll have to see how it works out.
Break up the power.
That's right, right? Into the distance.
Yeah, I did. To Russ's house, I'm about 12 miles. I'm 15 miles, I think, to Utah Poison Control.
That's pretty good distance. Is that expected to work? Because that seems pretty smart.
Yeah.
Really.
So the rule of thumb is the signal will make it about 20 miles or through one tree. So
Based on like what kind of gain and what kind of power?
just a typical antenna system. So a sector antenna should provide pretty good coverage.
Now, we're getting 20 miles with those little 5-inch.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a hard thing. to
Yeah,
do.
the SQTs.
Those are probably pretty high gain, right? Small ones, I guess, the gain.
They're 15.
Yeah, something like
But a
that.
sector antenna is gonna be way less, right?
Say it?
A sector antenna is gonna be way less gain than that.
Yeah, I don't know what the sector is.
I don't know what the gain is on those.
I mean, I guess we'll find out shortly, but, so you guys basically are expecting 12 miles to easily.
I think we can make 12 miles work as long as there aren't any trees in the way. So,
Without moon bounce.
yeah.
We'll keep that in our back pocket.
I don't think moon bounce is good for this particular band, but I don't know. Bigger antenna, right? Yeah. All right, so here's a zoomed in picture of connected nodes here in Salt Lake. And so you can see these nodes are at my house. This is Chris's house here. This is Sam's house. This is, and then this one is, who's this one way down here? I don't remember. And then we've got Jeff over here, and I don't know who's up here in Holiday.
He's just telling us somebody in California.
Yeah, he's not attached to our network at all. So we need to have a chat with him. So,
I could get that one, because I live just down the street.
oh, you can?
The 15S second antenna is 15 dBi.
It is.
And they have a 19 as well, I believe.
Yeah.
They have a 19S antenna as well. So, all right. So let's talk about Utah County. So most of the Utah County nodes are from the older generation. These were deployed a few years ago when interest first peaked on using AREDN, and then nobody's really done much with it. As far as I'm aware, there haven't been any current efforts to modernize their systems. As far as I know, it's a dead project right now. Now, Noji might have something to say about that. I haven't been able to get in touch with him to get any info from the Utah Valley Club. I reached out to a friend of mine who lives down there and he never responded. So either he's way too busy with work or my email went to his spam folder and he hasn't seen it.
Send me, you know, that you want me to talk to Noji about.
Sure, I will send it to you. Okay.
Was UVR kind of managing this one?
They were, yeah, at the time. So they had a node, they had a couple of nodes on Lake Mountain, both 2 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. They had a bunch of nodes in various places, but I don't know which, if any of those nodes are still operational. They had some cameras on top of Lake Mountain, and I recall the first time I was playing around with this, being able to pull up those camera views and see a view out over the entire Utah County from Lake Mountain. I don't know if those are still live or not. I know at one point they had deployed a ADSB receiver on Lake Mountain that ADSB, it's a
Oh,
protocol used by aviation. And they were feeding the data from that over the AREDN network to somebody's house and from there onto the internet. And that got killed in a lightning strike. And so, as far as I'm aware, that was never resurrected. But there are some things that were going on in Utah County. I don't know what the current state of affairs is down there because I haven't heard back from anybody. So unfortunately, Utah County, I think, is pretty dead at this point. Davis County is active and operational in Layton area. They've got a VoIP system currently deployed and in use. They've got mesh chat that they're using pretty heavily. The AREDN node that was at Layton City's ECC was removed when the building was demolished. So they are building a new dispatch center at that location. And indications are that the node will come back online when the new dispatch center comes online. So we'll see if that happens, but that's one of their goals. They have several nodes on Antelope Island. They have a 3 gigahertz node that they do not currently have any signal from. There's some interference with new users of the 3 gigahertz band, and I believe they shut it down because they didn't want to interfere with that. And there are 2 other nodes. There's a 5.8 gigahertz node pointed south that is still fully functional. The 5.8 gigahertz node pointed north is currently down due to some interference with the weather radar in Farmington. They did indicate to me that FCC engineers are looking at the weather radio or weather radar problem. And unfortunately, due to the government shutdown, they haven't heard any news back from the FCC. So I'm assuming all of that work is on hold at the moment until Congress gets their act together and figures out how to pass a budget.
Well, is that the weather radar interfering with the AREDN or the vice versa?
Yeah, the weather radar interferes with the AREDN. So Um, let's see, Washington County, this is the St. George group. They're currently running the old UI code from last year. They have not upgraded, and as far as I'm aware, they don't plan to upgrade anytime soon. They may upgrade next year when the Babel only releases become released. So we'll see if that happens. They've got multiple nodes deployed, mostly connecting via Starlink or internet-based tunnels. They aren't doing it. They experimented with some RF links and they weren't able to successfully keep those up. And I think if they were to upgrade to current versions that use PTMP and point-to-point options in the Wi-Fi signal, they might do better. Because the way the mesh networking works, it uses ad hoc mode. And a lot of times the equipment manufacturers, they don't fully support the ad hoc mode with their equipment. And so sometimes support for that lags behind where it should be. And the later versions of the AREDN software that use Babel, they have the facility to use more of the infrastructure mode model, which would allow better signals and better connectivity between sites. One of their goals was to have sites deployed on mountaintops that basically built a chain of RF connected servers or nodes between St. George and Cedar City. So that I believe is on hold pending any of these other changes. For the interim, what they're doing is they're deploying Starlink nodes along with each node, and they're tunneling between them over Starlink. So if you guys don't know what Starlink is SpaceX's project to provide internet service via satellite, and it actually works pretty darn well. And it's not abysmally expensive. You can get the mini node, I think, for $300 now. The mini ground station. It's a lot better than it used to be $600 for that. So it's a lot better than what it used to be. But they Starlink does have bandwidth limitations and charges for overuse of bandwidth and a total amount of bandwidth cap for the month and things like that. So there are limitations and restrictions on Starlink that may be a factor. I don't know. We'll have to see how that works out for them. They do have several deployed services, including cameras. They've got some Raspberry Pi computers. They've got a WinLink post office out there, and they're running something called Fast Fish. I tried to find Fast Fish, and the only thing I could find was a commercial piece of software that helps you identify fish quickly. I don't think it's that. And I did find another thing called Fast Fish that is a high-speed full text search engine. I don't know which one they're running. I'm thinking it's probably the latter, not the fish identifier. But you never know with guys down in St. George. I mean, there's a lot of fishing going on down there, um, but that's what I know about that network. So this is a layout of deployed nodes in Washington County, and you can see we have, let me see if I can turn my pointer on here. So you see we have the St. George area, and there's quite a bit of stuff going on in here. Is that showing up? I can't tell if that's showing up or not. Not really. Maybe I can make it brighter, bigger, or something.
Screen's still looking false, stuck in there.
Yeah, well,
I saw it just a little second ago,
okay.
on the lower left.
Yeah, it shows up down here. Let me see if I can change the color of it. That might. Laser pointer. It doesn't seem to believe me. It's still showing a red dot for me. Anyway, you can see there's quite a few nodes in St. George, and then they've got some stuff up here into Ivans. They've got some stuff out here over to Hurricane. The intention is to continue deploying these types of nodes using Starlink as their backbone. And here's a glimpse of the old UI. for those of you who want to reminisce to the bad old days. This is a picture of what's going on their mesh. This was sent to me just a couple days ago. So you can see there's quite a few nodes active and working. There's a lot of different services out there that they're playing with. I haven't heard any indications that they're planning to upgrade to the current revision. I'm suspecting they're going to wait until next year to do that. And I know a couple of people around here have checked in successfully to their mesh via tunnel using older versions of the software. So they have definitely seen that happen. But that's what's going on in Washington County. Cache County, the Logan and surrounding area, I was not able to get any response from anyone up in Logan. So I'm not sure what they're doing up there. If anybody knows what's going on up there, let me know. I would be interested in collating that information and getting it together with what I have.
Tyler?
I haven't heard back from anybody up there. So unfortunately, yeah, that's been a black hole as far as I'm concerned. They were using it a few years ago. I don't know if any of that is still active. They're not connected to the Supernode network, so they definitely haven't kept anything updated. All right, what's next for AREDN in Utah? So efforts here in Salt Lake continue. Salt Lake County ARES is working with Intermountain Health and Utah Poison Control to get sector antennas installed at different locations. We have people reaching out to repeater owners about co-locating sector antennas at mountaintop sites. That would be awesome. We're looking at the possibility of deploying antennas on our tower and potentially omnidirectional nodes at the elementary schools and fire departments. That would be pretty awesome for coverage within Murray. I would certainly be supportive of other cities doing the same. It's kind of up to the city at this stage. We'd have to see what happens. And yes, sir.
This is hard. Are you looking into emergency,
The
support?
the
network?
goal is to provide, so AREDN stands for Amateur Radio Emergency Data Network. And the goal is to provide high-speed network services, even in the event that the internet goes away. Everybody's thinking, well, what's wrong with just deploying Starlink nodes everywhere? The problem is the way Starlink works right now is your ground station pings up to a satellite, and that satellite pings down to a ground station, and then it goes over fiber or whatever from there. If that ground station that your satellite can see doesn't have internet, you don't have internet. Now there's lots of satellites, and your ground station will switch from satellite to satellite as they pass over. They're not super high up. They're at about what, 200 miles, 200 to 300 miles. So they move relatively quickly, but there's a lot of them. When Starlink starts deploying the Gen 3 satellites, those satellites will actually have the facility to communicate between satellites. And so they will be able to work around a failed ground station and deliver a signal from satellite. So from your ground station to a satellite, to another satellite, potentially to yet another satellite, and then to a ground station significantly far away from where you are, that it would hopefully be out of the range of whatever disaster was befalling your area. That has not happened yet, and that won't happen until the SpaceX Starship is fully operational and deploying satellites. So they're not going to deploy any of the version 3 Starlink satellites until Starship is working. Starship is not currently in a release state. So that, I don't know what the time frame they're looking at for that is, but I've heard by 2027 they expect to have that happening. Let's see, more amateurs in Salt Lake are getting into the game. They're buying equipment and playing around with it at their houses. Murray Amateur Radio Club, has been engaged in a deep dive on AREDN. This is episode eight, I think, 8 or 9.
Yeah.
We missed a couple because I had some personal issues that had to get taken care of. So we missed a couple along the way, but we've had quite a few this year. And I think we've got one more coming up next month. So we'll see how that goes. But we've been archiving our videos of each meeting. So you're welcome to go back and watch previous sessions if you didn't get a chance to see them in person. And experimentation continues. So we'll see where we go. I know Chris that lives in Harriman, I can't remember his call sign. He is planning on deploying a Proxmox server that will offer a lot of different services onto the mesh. And as his health permits, he will continue to work on that project. So lots of things going on, lots of interesting stuff happening.
The big advantage over repeater linking as compared to this.
So you have you used packet radio before?
Yeah.
So the question is, what's the advantage of AREDN over just basic repeater linking? So for starters, basic repeater linking, like the intermount and intertie, is voice only, right? So yeah, you could probably run slow scans TV image over that and maybe use Rattlegram or something like that to send text messages with some error correction, but it's primarily a voice communications mechanism. And voice communications mechanisms are subject to misunderstanding, mishearing, static noise, all that kind of stuff can affect how well your signal gets around. Packet radio was great in the 80s, but the speed of packet radio, you're pretty much maxing out at 1200 baud. This stuff is running at, what would you call it? 5 million baud or something like that. So there's no way you're going to take a high resolution picture of a failed um, what floodwater control system gate that's malfunctioning and send it over packet radio to somebody who can do something about it. But you could easily send that in a matter of seconds to somebody over an AirDIN link
At the same time, being on a voice phone call.
with that person. Yeah. You could do a video conference with that person while you're showing them what's going on.
Basically the same technology as the internet. It's kind of like our own private internet.
Yeah, it's like our own private internet. So anything that you can do on the internet, you can do on an AirDIN network. So VoIP phones, video conferencing, file sharing, chat, email.
In fact, the dishes that some of us have are repurposed dishes from Central Utah's internet service provider.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of us got into some of the Ubiquity Light Beam and Power Beam systems. What did we do? There were like 36 of them or something like that. We had a big flashing party. Jeff and I went to it and a couple other people over at Paul's house, and we spent what, 4 or 5 hours getting them all getting aired and deployed. Were you there? You were there. No, you were there. So yeah, it was there was another guy.
Well, besides Paul.
Yeah, there was another guy plus Paul.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Anyway, that was a year ago. But yeah, so there's a lot of things that you can do with this type of a network that you could do them using packet radio, for example, or via over other radio networks. But the speed factor is the key.
But
This is
have the equipment each end
yes,
to do that.
and the equipment is fairly inexpensive to get into. You can get a SXT SQ for under $100. So, yeah, there's a lot of things we can do with it. Let's see. So Davis County, they are continuing to improve their network utilization. They're working with the FCC, trying to get that north pointing node up and operating again. And the new dispatch center hopefully will become a cornerstone for their network when it comes online. I don't know what the time frame is for that building construction, but it's probably at least a year out. Yes.
Can anybody in the valley here hit the south face of the?
I know some people took their nodes up to the Antelope Island Causeway and pointed them at Antelope Island and were able to make connections there. I think you would need a pretty good dish and a pretty high location here to do it from here.
Too far.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, it's,
line of sight is okay, but it just,
I think the peak is blocks the dish from southward exposure, I think is what.
yeah, I don't know all the details.
Well, no, now,
I don't know all the details of what direction their dishes are pointing or any of that stuff, so I'm not sure what equipment they even have up there. But I know some people did do that when we first started buying equipment. Somebody drove up there and sat in the parking lot at this end of the causeway and pointed their system at the island and was able to get online and pull node reports. It was all old UI stuff, but yeah, so interesting to see that that was there. But yeah, they are definitely interested in expanding the utilization of their network. Washington County, they continue their efforts to deploy nodes linked via Starlink. The concerns there are Starlink is a commercial service. You got to pay for that service. You got to pay for the equipment up front. The service has got a monthly fee, and you have to be aware of all of those kind of constraints. As far as I know, their current plans are not to upgrade until probably next year. And they are experimenting with a variety of services and equipment on the mesh. They are pretty active in playing with it.
The Starlink, they have like 5 gig or something pointed down into the valleys, access it, or is it just all Starlink?
I don't know. When you look at that page, let me pull it back up. If you zoom in on this, all of these links say they're tunnel links. So
That's the only thing that Brad's been pushing down there.
yeah, is the Starlink, right? So
Seems to me that if you start using Starlink, to send, television, minimum 6 megahertz bandwidth, it's gonna cost you some money.
I would think that, yeah, I would think, I'm not sure what the billing pattern is for Starlink, but yeah, I could think it could run into money if you are doing a lot of that over that system. So I don't know. That's something that they're chasing down there. And I know there are people who have portable Starlink nodes. I know Sam's got a Starlink set up on his trailer, and he has been able to link into his home network over Starlink using a node on the trailer. And that's a doable thing. I've considered getting Starlink as a backup for my Utopia network. Um, just as, I wouldn't necessarily use it all the time, but I'd have it available for when I needed it. They have an arrangement where it's only $5 a month to keep the account open, even with it inactive. And so that might be a utilization pattern that could be leveraged in some kind of emergency event or something. I don't know. I would prefer to not depend on the commercial service. And I would prefer that we had solid RF links all over the valley and we're using that. So that's the direction I'm pushing. So within Utah, the potential exists for links between various operating areas. We could put a node that points at Antelope Island and connect the Davis network with our network here in Salt Lake. We could point a node down at Lake Mountain and connect to their node down there, assuming it's still operational, and bring that online. So we could have a single network that spanned from Davis County all the way down to Utah County. I don't know if that's a good idea or not. Certainly not with OLSR, but as we move to Babel routing, I think it may be a viable solution. Getting more RF links up Getting away from tunnels would improve the reliability of the network in the event of a widespread outage. My internet was down for 30 hours this week.
Yeah, mine was down today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It came up at 4:30 this morning. It was down since noon day before yesterday.
Sent me a text, said, "We're sorry."
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, thanks a lot, right? Yeah, Utopia. Apparently squirrels chewed the fiber.
Xfinity's hasn't been a whole lot better.
Yeah, we had Xfinity for years and they sucked just as much. And I was talking to somebody about Starlink versus terrestrial wireless internet service providers. I was talking to him at lunch today, and if you think about it, the reason Starlink is so much better than a terrestrial wireless ISP is your local wireless ISP is shooting through 20, 10 to 20 miles of thick atmosphere, whereas Starlink has maybe 8 miles, 8 or 9 miles of thinning atmosphere shooting pretty much straight up. So that's why their system is much more robust or more reliable.
Are there still wireless ISPs around?
There are, yeah, there are still some.
The T-Mobile. Got a T-Mobile.
T-Mobile is out there too, yeah.
Much more reliable than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, T-Mobile's hotspot setup where
Speeds.
Same as Xfinity, I get 300-400.
Well, how just do it gig plus?
anyway, so there's a lot of things going on with AREDN within Utah. Another thing is more services, getting more services online, cameras, chat services, VoIP, that's voice over IP, PBXs, private branch exchange phone systems, complete with voicemail and dialing tree stuff and all of that. You can do all of that. File servers, bulletin board systems, time servers, map servers. I would love, I would love to get a WinLink post office online here in Utah, in Salt Lake, that was a WinLink hybrid node. That even if we had no internet at all, we could still reach out via HF from a centralized node. Anybody on the AREDN mesh could talk to it. Anybody on VHF or UHF could talk to it over packet or whatever. I think that is something that we really need to have here. There used to be a hybrid node in Farmington that was part of that Davis County building that got torn down. And I don't know what the disposition of that node was, but it's not online right now. So
That'd be really nice to be able to link in with HF because that'll work really well in an emergency.
it would, yeah, exactly. And so,
The values and
we've talked about WinLink a lot in here, and it's just a really rock solid technology, and we need to leverage that. We need to make that accessible and usable for anybody who needs to get on it, right? And that's got to happen before we need it, right? So those are things that I would like to see happen, things I would like to see going on. Also, more exploration of backhauls and tunnels over Starlink. I think there are some advantages to that. Depending on it, I don't think is a great idea, but having that functionality available could certainly be useful. So we'll see how it works out. Also, backbones for other technologies. We could run repeater links over an AREDN network. So if you've got two repeaters that are distant from each other, but both can reach an AREDN node, then you could run your repeater link over that network connection without having to have a separate RF connection and use a repeater pair of frequencies for those two repeaters to talk to each other. I know Paul has been designing his 10-meter repeater, and he wants to link the receive radio with the transmit radio over an AREDN link. So it may end up being just a very simple point-to-point link, but it could be linked into the full AREDN network. So
the Aries test in November, sort of like that. Like there's going to be handhelds, basically being repeated over an AREDN network to a phone. So it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah. So
gonna be 7 centimeters into an auto patch into the air and to the void.
So lots of cool things that we can do. Meshtastic supports MQTT links. If you're not familiar with MQTT, it's the message queuing telemetry transport. It's a very simple message queuing system. It's a pub sub type system. So you have devices that publish information to this queue and devices that consume it or subscribe to it. And Meshtastic nodes have this built in. So if you've got multiple Meshtastic networks that have connectivity into an AREDN backbone, they can all talk to each other over this wide area network. So kind of a cool thing. TAC services, we talked about TAC a few weeks ago. TAC is the team awareness kit, and it basically on your phone gives you a map where you can place things and it's automatically sent out over Meshtastic. You tie this into an AREDN backbone and you've got that information. You can put it up on a screen right there at the ECC. And the people who need to see that information about what's where, it's right there. You could slap a Meshtastic node with a GPS on it and a solar power housing on the roof of a fire truck or a police car. And without the vehicle operators having to do anything or touch anything or know anything about it, it would just sit there and do its thing, and it would report the location and utilization of any of those resources. All would be pulled into TAC and displayed on everybody's devices so that everybody knows what's where. So in an emergency situation, that could be crucial information to have. Lots of things we can do. That's it. Any questions? Any comments? Yes.
The Morse micro.
Morse Micro has got the Halo one. That is supported in the Babel only build. It's not supported in the release builds yet. It will be in release builds next year, but it is supported in the Babel only build right now. That's a 900 megahertz system. Penetrates the leaves a lot better. And that equipment's not crazily expensive either. And you could easily put a directional antenna on that and point it wherever you need it to go. So I'm thinking about that for my house because my house is surrounded by trees. And if we had some of those set up with sector antennas or something like that, I don't know if there are any sector antennas for 900 megahertz, but surely there should be. But we could do something. I'm sure we could figure something out. We're amateur radio operators, right? We can build stuff. We can build antennas. We can do things. Yeah, chainsaw. Take my leaves down. My wife would not be happy. But yeah, so there is that potential. The 900 megahertz band is pretty available, and we could easily run some point-to-point AREDN links over that for places that are hard to get to. Yeah.
I've been learning about the stuff, the prepper groups are really into this, so there's a lot of parallel efforts. I actually went to the 801 Labs group downtown. It's a bunch of young kids who are too smart for their own good, and they're playing around with a lot of that.
We need to introduce them to amateur radio.
Well, there's a few, actually the leader has got his license, and they're seem to be interested, so we should figure out how to connect with them, because it's some good energy.
Yeah.
About it, and they use 351, so they're channel 51 mesh type stuff.
Yeah.
We're focused now, but they're also into the looking at Halo and license and stuff as well. So.
Cool. Yeah, so they're very interested in emergency preparation. They're not so much interested in helping people with emergency communications, but they're definitely interested in learning how it works and using it for themselves.
Twice a month on Tuesdays, they have radio night down there at 801 Labs. And they basically talk about the same stuff.
Cool. All right. Other questions, comments?
Well, I'm just gonna have to learn more about it.
Yep, you're gonna have to, Stan. That's a requirement. You can't stop learning. If you stop learning, you might as well just give up. So.
So I'm going to expand.
All right. With that, I'm gonna end the recording and I will say goodbye to my YouTube fans, all 6 of them. And we'll get this posted as soon as I can.